Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. My name is Tania Esteban and I'm a wildlife filmmaker. And today I'm going to be talking you through the workflow of a wildlife filmmaker. And yeah, hopefully giving you some examples of where you can use sound in your own productions. So I'm going to dive straight in because we've not got much time. And of course, firstly, I hope you're all doing well because it's very strange times. Obviously, we're doing a lot of things virtually and it's a shame we can't be able to meet you all this year in person, but yes, please do feel free to ask any questions on my accounts or of course during the Q&A as well. Okay, so let's share my screen and see if this will work. Fantastic, I believe I am sharing my screen now, which is great. And we can dive straight into the presentation. It's really annoying having this little me on the side corner, but I'll try and crack on as best as I can. Okay. Right. Great. Yeah, so as I introduced myself earlier, my name is Tania Esteban and I am a freelance filmmaker and researcher. So that's my current job. I work for big companies such as the BBC or Silverback Films, which is where I'm at now. And we create and produce natural history documentaries for Netflix, WWF, and Disney Nature, as well as other sort of major organizations as well. And sort of first and foremost, I've always been really passionate about natural history and wanting to use storytelling and technology to be able to engage and sort of enthrall audiences to really care about the natural world, because it's something that I care deeply about, but also it's just about using storytelling to try and make any difference really that we can, especially during these very difficult times. And I also work as a freelance camera woman or camera assistant, depending which level I'm shooting at, and also work with Panasonic as a brand ambassador. So it's all very exciting. And yeah, I'm just, hopefully this talk will be able to give you some information about taking some of the kind of tips and tools that I've been using in the trade really from professionals to be able to make your own natural history documentaries and films on a slightly different budget, because of course it's very costly to make these big hit films really. And of course sound is a huge part of this as well, which is why I'm thrilled to be doing this in partnership with Sennheiser. And of course their audio equipment is, you know, first class. It's absolutely incredible, and it's something that is a sort of broadcast standard throughout the industry. So yes, what goes into making natural history films, and what elements can you take away to apply to your own nature films? And of course, recording sound in the field is something that can be forgotten on a lot of blue chip natural history documentaries just because it's added in post, but I'm going to hopefully tell you ways you can do it for your own productions and do one better. And of course, the sound kit and equipment that I would use as well. And of course, I think every one of you probably watching this knows who this great man is, Sir David Attenborough. This was at a talk that I went to a couple of years ago, and he pretty much started the whole industry. I mean, unquestionably, he's one of the greatest sources of inspiration for most people in this industry, and certainly myself and many others probably got into this because of him. I was also hugely inspired by an incredible DOP and cinematographer, Sophie Darlington, because there's very few natural history camera women in the industry, so she greatly inspired myself. And I get sort of asked this a lot of the time, which is, what is it that you actually do? And I think this is a really lovely summary because it's pretty much everything. We're kind of jack of all trades, from, you know, pre-production to production to post-production. We get involved with a whole range of different elements really throughout the different stages of production. So I just wanted to run through very briefly, because I could be on this forever, the different roles that you can get involved with if you're interested in getting natural history. It doesn't have to just involve camera work or sound. So of course you've got your executive producers, who are the sort of big head honchos, and they're very much involved they're responsible firstly for delivering what they promised for the series. And they have a very creative role overseeing all of the episodes from production to post. And they have obviously the kind of final say on creative decisions. And then you've got the series producers as well, who are very heavily tied in with the story, style and direction, and they're like the composers of your beautifully orchestrated production, where they'll be kind of overseeing all of the producers and what they're getting up to on their individual episodes. And of course, producers as well, they're kind of jack of all trades, you know, obviously more senior than an APM researcher. And they can kind of help you. I mean, they have the biggest file of facts of all the contacts in the industry, really, because they need to be able to put the best teams and crews together before shoots, and they'll know exactly who would be the best person to go out on location to do that. And so they essentially do things from researching, but of course have a massive input in all of that hugely editorial aspect of it. And they will do a little bit of research, but that's kind of left to mostly the assistant producers or the researchers. But most of their time will be spent overseeing that process really with their team and making all of those massive decisions really. Then moving on to production teams, which actually usually are out on location, although that doesn't mean the editorial team don't, because most of us will be directors and actually go off out into the field. You'll have, of course, your cameraman or camerawoman who will be filming, and of course your sound recorders as well. And I mean, for natural history, it doesn't tend to be the case where you get people out recording sound just because of the budget, which I'll come onto that a little bit later on, because it's something that we should pay more attention to. And of course, you have your field director as well, who is trying to help pull the story together with your cinematographer, keep track of the shots that you're getting, and essentially be able to, you know, capture the entire sequence that you set out to achieve. Then you'll have a fixer who, I mean, they're absolutely vital to the success really of your productions, especially when you're working very logistically complex areas or areas that might be questionably safe. So you need to be able to have someone who knows the local area, the local customs, the people, the roads, and they may well know where the animals are as well, and also be behaviorologists and have a good scientific understanding of the natural world. Then you have post-production. So this is when you've captured all of your amazing footage and you're back home. And of course you have your amazing editor who pulls the story together essentially. Without your editor, you would be nothing on a production. So they're very sought after, and often you book them months in advance or years in advance if you want to be able to get them for your particular series or program, or in your film in this case. Then you have a color grader as well, who a lot of people don't really know what a color grader is, and just think of them as someone who's kind of being able to set the style and tone for your film towards the end. Once you've finished your offline and online edits, you'll have a color grader come in and really set the mood and tone for it. So if you're doing a travel documentary, you might have sort of golden hues and sepia tones to kind of really emphasize that holiday feeling really. And likewise, if you're in a colder environment, you might sort of emphasize those blue tones. And of course you have a Foley artist who, you know, we'll be mentioning in terms of sound, because they create all those sort of sound effects, panda chewing on bamboo, and it could well be your Foley artist munching on some celery, which is always the case. And then your musician, which this is Richard, my absolute hero in terms of music. He is such a talented composer, and they really bring out the emotion, the story. Then you have your dubbing mixer as well. And the dubbing mixer essentially mixes all of those elements of the sound effects and the beautiful music that you've got, and lays the track out so that you can have perfectly seamless sound, which is often the most important towards the end, because you really notice bad sound. You can sort of wing it a little bit sometimes with bad images, but you can't you can't bluff sound. And then narrator, of course, for any of that narration-led series. And of course, you know, if you're looking to get into production and television, you'll be thinking, how are each of these steps kind of composed? And often it's the most creative part of the process when you're in pre-production and you've gotten an idea and you've got it commissioned and you start fleshing it out. And you've got your commissioner on board. But how do you do that? And what are the sort of tips and techniques about how you could go about doing this? So treatments are hugely important, because it sort of sets out your style and theme and your narrative arc, as well as who your characters are. And usually it's a 2-pager, have your story in 1 paragraph. And also, if you can, provide a sort of sizzle or show reel to kind of really entice your commissioner and get them on board with your story. Of course, storyboards also help because you can plan your shots, your framing, your size and angle as well, which is brilliant. Then you've got to think very carefully about your characters, because obviously they're going to flesh out your entire story, and think about ways to really introduce your characters memorably as well, because you know, this is going to be the first impression that your audience have of them. And in this case with wildlife, obviously you can't tell them to act in a particular way, but you can always film them and introduce them in the edit in a particular way. So you can also do this by introducing them memorably by simplifying their setting visually. So you can do that through your camera, have a shallow depth of field. Individual characters will also have unique markings on their face as well. You can highlight their motivation. Are there animals that are hunting? You can show that through POV perspective as well as the animals hunting. Do these characters have any flaws? Are they very arrogant? Are they juveniles, you know, who are very naive and don't know how to court a female? So think about all these things as you're shooting, and the ways that you can build that in the edit. And of course, what do they want? What is the driving motivation for your character doing X, Y, or Z? Are they hungry? Are they, you know, trying to find a mate? Trying to build a house? And then, yeah, of course, that sort of relays what your hero is doing in terms of a quest. And also, how do they change as a result of that? Do they learn how to become a better dancer because they failed in terms of the mating game and dancing, etc.? So these are all things that you can consider when you're building your stories. But please do remember that empathy is the absolute key to all of this, because if you can't empathize with your characters, then yeah, you won't care what happens to them, or if they get eaten or they don't win a partner. So really think about fleshing out your characters so that you can get people to care about them in the first instance. And then just very briefly, as a little example, I recently, well, a couple of years ago really, time is flying, went to the beautiful Laos, which is kind of the cousin country of Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand. It's nestled in between them. And it used to be known as the land of 1,000 elephants. And I was intrigued by the relationship that the mahouts had with their elephants. And this particular man named V, a remarkable individual who's in his 80s, had this unbreakable bond with this beautiful female elephant called Mema. And he had this everlasting bond. It was so strong that he never used his chains, whips to communicate with her, which traditionally that's how it was done in the past. But instead he uses voice. So this film I produced for Panasonic in conjunction with WWF, came out a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to basically tell a short little story about their emotional connection. So if I can escape this, I will show you a quick clip of that.
อันนี้ให้ก็หัวหีนี่ก็บ่ได้ซื้อแค่นเราหมู่เรามาสวนซื้อสร้างเข้ากันเถอะแล้วก็มาเบิ่งสร้างทำไมมันยังสร้างน้อยอยู่สำงามแล้วก็มันเหมาะแดแล้วก็เอาไปเลี้ยงพอก็เฮาได้ไปหาได้มาก็มามัดไว้ก็อาทิตย์หนึ่งเขาอาทิตย์ปล่อยไปใส่สนเนะ
So yeah, I just wanted to show you that just to give you an example of obviously how much of an effect sound has. on the emotional awareness of the audience of the characters, because it's obviously something very important to be able to create a very realistic environment. And so all of that sound was recorded separately from my main camera, and I used obviously Sennheiser product, which the directional microphones are amazing. The 416 is fantastic to be able to pick up those very detailed sounds. Obviously, I was able to get close enough to an elephant to pick up just the slight breaths of the animal, which it really does make a huge difference, because it feels like you can actually touch the elephant. It really does. And emotionally, it certainly strikes a chord with me, because it reminds me of how remarkable this animal was. It's not just visual. If you had no sound on that at all, no music, no sound effects, you would not feel that connection like you would do. I would say that's my personal opinion. I hope you feel the same way. So why there's this big question as to why is sound sort of taking a back seat in a lot of productions, and unfortunately a lot of it is down to cost. The biggest factor, obviously, being able to afford to send a professional out on location. Budgets are getting tighter unless you're working on the big Netflix productions and you can afford to send someone over. It's usually a director or an AP who will actually do this themselves. They will actually, for example, myself, I will go out there with my equipment and film. So it's just a way for productions to save money. Also, in terms of Albert sustainability, we're trying to reduce the number of people we fly out, and have a carbon footprint as well. So the more people on production can actually record sound as well, the better, essentially. So it reduces that kind of impact too. Kit restrictions, obviously you've got a lot of equipment that you're taking anyway, in terms of cameras and the practicalities of actually getting close enough to an animal to be able to record the sound. Again, this elephant was relatively tame, because she was raised by this mahout, so I could get close. But obviously in the wild, if you're doing a wild sequence, you couldn't get that close to a polar bear because it ripped your face off. So those are the practical elements where maybe perhaps a set of radio mics you could sort of sneak or hide in trees or foliage, which I have done before, would be able to be very valuable in this situation. And certainly that's what I've done recently on a trip. I can't tell you where, but it was very exciting, and we were able to hide some of the microphones to be able to capture amazing bird calls. And of course, you can do it in post-production, which is what most people do in the end. This is what you have Foley artists for. It's an art form in itself, really, and you can have that kind of generic chomping on bamboo, and you can have highly sensitive directional microphones to be able to capture that kind of really deep, rich sense of sound, to really add to that sequence. And then of course you'll have music that will cover it later on as well. Just squizzing through. So just to briefly go back and explain the sort of researcher step. So when you're thinking about setting up your shoots, so pre-production is a very important part of this. So obviously the science and all the paper, the scientific papers that you read through will be able to provide you with that information to find those stories in the first instance. And of course, books and the internet help as well. And in terms of the, building up your relationship with scientists, that's what phones are for. There's nothing quite like picking up a phone and actually speaking to people to find out the really interesting stories, and just to build up that relationship, because they're so valuable to the industry and to the world that you should really respect and listen to how their version of the story should be as well. Because obviously producers might, and ourselves, not just producers, the whole industry might think they know better in terms of, telling people their version of the story. But at the end of the day, it's their research. So it's very important to display that and represent that very, very, close to how they originally got that research. So who, what, where, when, how, all the questions we always ask ourselves to be able to actually set up a shoot. How is this animal moving and feeding? When is it doing this behavior? How are we going to film it? Who's going to film it? So these are all aspects to how we think about filming. And of course, a series is kind of, say like a 5-part series or 6-part series will consist of 1-hour episodes. And per episode, you have 10 to 12 mini sequences, which could be about 10 minutes long. And they're all connected through overarching links. These themes or links can be seasonal or behavioral. Are they hunting, courting, or habitat based? So deserts, jungles. And that's how Collective UC episode 1 is jungles, or episode 2 is deserts. And then you have different challenges as well that each of your characters or animals face. And then step 3 is the fun logistical part. So this is your production coordinator and yourself that we're working to try and get this set up and done. So you have your permits in place, and you think, how can we film here? In terms of drone permissions, you need to be able to get these if you're doing it commercially. For your own productions, you won't need this necessarily, but do check. Kit, what kind of specialized equipment do we need? Do we need gimbals, long lens cameras, macro cameras, gimbal, all that kind of aspect of and sort of workflow. You've got to think about what animal you're filming. Is it a small insect, or is it a massive enormous animal? Can you get a gimbal to move around the animal? Can you get drone perspective aerials of it? Can you use remote camera traps as well to capture the footage? Think about what you want to achieve with your sequence, and then use that equipment to tell it. And that's what's brilliant about technologies. You basically have a solution for everything, and that's why I adore it. And then crew, who's going to be filming it. If you've got a specialist cameraman or camera woman that is able to actually use this specialized equipment, like thermal imaging, drones underwater, and then obviously get in touch with them and see if they can actually, or interested in your sequence. And then risk assessments, of course, is very important for health and safety. And then step 4, you're actually on location and filming, which is great. And you have to lug all of this equipment through the airports, which is great fun, especially now as we're COVID bound. It's everything in masks and gloves, great fun. And who goes out on location? So it'll be your camera operators or cameramen and women, your producer, director, assistant producer, or researcher, who will all direct essentially. And yeah, I mean, get filming. This is the most fun, obviously, you have. If you enjoy being out in the field. I adore it personally, and I love working with amazing teams. So if anyone, a hi to all my colleagues, if any of you are listening to this, I love you all very much. They're absolutely brilliant, and often, you keep wanting to work with the people that you really enjoy being with. And then, of course, in terms of sound, where can it be used? Many different scenarios. You can have remote hides recording it and triggering it with with your, for example, your setup back from your hide so that you're not disturbing the wildlife. So again, I use the 416 because it's such a fantastic mic. Very, shotgun microphone. They're hugely sensitive, and you're able to, extend your XLR cable, go way back, and record that on a device such as the H5 Zoom. Of course, making of as well. The Ambio microphones, which are fantastic for kind of virtual reality shots if you're doing some online content. And also, the radio mics, the G3s are fantastic. They never fail me, and I use those all the time. So yeah, those are just a couple of scenarios that you can use some of this equipment, and I've just listed it here for you to have a look at. And of course, you've got the 722 mixer as well for high-end broadcasting, sound recording, because you can take multiple feeds coming in. I just take the H5 Zoom because it's got two feeds, and I don't need more than that usually. If I'm doing some sound with my microphones, my G3s, and then kind of, using my 416. The memory mic is also fantastic if you're shooting on mirrorless cameras as well. So why is sound important? I'm going to chat about this for the last section of it, because I think a lot of people underestimate how important it is. And obviously, scientifically, all animals are communicating, through visuals, obviously through the way they look or gestures that they do. So, for example, if they're trying to attract a mate, they'll have bright colors or do a particular dance. But sound is also hugely important, especially with birds. They have incredible vocal mimicry or repertoires of, very loud sounds that pierce through the jungle, so trying to attract mates. And it has that, element that feeds straight back into their behavior and exactly what they do. So it's very important, if you go back to what we were talking about before, storytelling, we need to use all of these aspects of visuals and sound to tell that story, essentially. Again, so story, it informs a lot about how your characters use sound to hunt, so keeping very quiet, or using, so for example, drongos will warn other animals of danger, deterring rivals to win a mate. Also mother and offspring relationships, reassuring, communicating and then warning others of danger. So there's a whole suite of behaviors that directly feed into the life histology of these animals. Then in the edit, if you have poor quality sound, it's horrible, because it can completely ruin your beautiful visuals that you've worked very hard to do. So that's why, again, high quality sound, get your microphones in there and recording it, and recording if you can, because it will cost a lot of money in post. And breathing space. I'm going to take this opportunity to have a breath. In between all the action and cinematic glory, you want to be able to have those beautiful pauses as well. And you can just focus on the sound effects with no music or vocals. And this is my great friend, Stephen, who I adore. Comedic effects. So you can have quirky little sound effects that just add to the sort of humor of the moment. And then new science, you can often record sounds that have never been heard by any other human before. So that's always super exciting, because it can not only help the scientists, but it can also show audiences how amazing the natural world is. And then you have post-production. So this is where you all pull it together, where you've got your script, editing, grading, and music. So everything that I was discussing before. So your script writing, obviously here, this is where your narrator can then narrate, and then you've got the sound, which is added to that. And then your editing stage, where you're pulling all of your visuals together. Then you have your color grading as well, which I mentioned. And then of course, music, which, you can score, you can have a special composer to score specifically to your images and really add to them sort of mood and tempo to it. And obviously highlight the narration if you've got narration in there, and complement the sound effects, because you don't want the music to be too overpowering. But again, these are all recorded with highly expensive and professional, microphones that will make the difference between a Hollywood blockbuster sounding film versus, a terrible, recorded this on my laptop sound, which that's probably what this is going to sound like. I do apologize. And aside from natural sounds, good quality music and scores, of course, have that potential to be able to really make your audience feel things. And I think the thing that most people remember from the big Hollywood films are, the Spielberg films in particular, is the music, the score, and all of those really amazing sound effects, the cracking of the whip. And of course, that's all recorded by, quality microphones. And of course, you don't have to go overboard on budget. Depends, Sennheiser, for example, have a whole range of sound equipment that can suit everyone's needs, budgetary, and also situationally as well. It's a case-by-case basis by which you use their equipment. And then once you finish your film, of course, you get it out there on social media, because you want to share it with the rest of the world and release it in film festivals or DVDs. I don't think anyone owns a DVD player anymore. Do correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of it, obviously, SVOD streaming online is huge now. So that's something to consider. But yeah, get it into film festivals as well. And if you've recorded that sound, and I do apologize, there's a very loud sound outside where I am, you can always mix it in 5.1 surround sound as well, because it can really immerse your audience and make it really feel cinematic. And yeah, top tips for sound, I would say, to sort of wrap it up, do learn Pro Tools, because it's a software that, enables you to really professionally blend your sound seamlessly, so that there's no clips in between your different pictures. It's an amazing software tool. I'll post something up after in the Q&A, because it's fantastic, brilliant software. Watch your wildlife closely, and try and anticipate what kind of sounds they'd be making. Take notes as well. That's what we do in the field. We take notes as to what sounds we think they'll be doing, to help the Foley artists and sound mixers later. And sound education, just read up on the different sounds, obviously, that animals make, but also the different equipment that's out there that you can use for particular scenarios, which I've just mentioned before. And listen to archive sequences as well, and try and make a note and think, actually, I would add this, or that's too much. Because often, sometimes it can be it could be too much if you add too much sound, and how those sequences can be improved upon. And yeah, just to wrap it up, really, why do we tell stories? For me personally, it's something that I'm very passionate about, because I want to use technology to be able to get people very inspired and engaged with the natural world, so that they can, make those small differences in their life, to be able to help the planet, but also to go out there and enjoy it as well, because it's a huge part of our lives, really. And I think that we've been sort of disconnected from it because of all our sort of technology that we use. So yeah, I mean, if we can use technology to get us back out there in nature, then that's something that I'm hugely passionate about, but also wanting to make a difference to these incredible animals, because the planet is under a lot of pressure at the moment. But there's a lot of amazing people out there who are doing a lot to make a difference, really. So yeah, I hope that was useful. And I'm just going to stop sharing the screen now. Go back. Ooh. Go back to me. Hello, everyone. And I please do ask any questions that you have at all. You can tweet me on at Tania Esteban _ or Tania.rose.esteban Instagram account. And yeah, I mean, please feel free to join the Q&A session as well after, to ask me anything, literally. I'm here to help you all become better storytellers. If I can offer you any tips or hints, I would love to do so. So yeah, I hope you all stay safe and take care.